Hey guys, welcome back to my channel called How To. So it will be our lab 4 for DMVPN phase 2 using dynamic mapping. Okay, so on the previous section we have seen how to configure DMVPN phase 2 using static mapping, and now let's quickly jump in on the lab to configure, verify phase 2 dynamic mapping, right? So just in short, on the phase 1, the connection between spoke was able to happen uh, due to the hub, right? So the hub was the mediator in between, but in VPN phase 2 we are able to have a direct spoke to spoke reachability, right? So in the previous section we have seen how to achieve this spoke to spoke direct communication using static mapping. Now let's jump in to see how we can achieve the same thing using dynamic mapping. So the configuration and the command line would be same if you have seen my previous videos on the phase 1, the difference between the static and the dynamic mapping. So similar commands, so only those differences would be uh, here as well. Okay, so I'll jump into hub 1. I'll just get rid of it of my previous config. First of all, I do have the tunnel 1, right? Config t no interface tunnel 1. Okay, exit. So I interface brief. Okay, let's configure the hub first. Let's configure the hub first. Interface tunnel 1 IP address would be 168.100.1. What I'll do, I'll just get rid of spoke 2 and spoke 3 as well. So I interface brief. I do have that old config here, right? So config t no interface tunnel 1. Similarly on spoke 2 as well. Sorry, config t no interface tunnel 1. Okay, let's get back to hub and configure our tunnel IP, that is 192.168.100.1. So this lab is really simple. All you need to do is just create the topology and do a couple of labs by your own, and at least you'll know, at least looking into the command line, right? At least you'll get an idea, right, how the DMVPN like what's the configuration, and so looking into the configuration you will understand it's in phase 1 or it's in phase 2, how it's configured using static mapping or dynamic mapping, right? So just try to do the lab by your own, uh, and that's how you should practice. Even I do the same, but still I do lots of mistakes, right? But yeah, the much more mistakes you'll make, the more you'll learn. Okay, so the IP address is 100.1, so the tunnel source would be our gig 0/0. Tunnel mode could be our multipoint, GRE multipoint, right? Now IP NHRP network ID would be 10. Okay, so that's the simple command that we have to run in the hub section. So running config for interface tunnel 1. So the IP address has been configured, network ID had been configured, tunnel source has been configured, and the tunnel mode has been configured. So it's not a static mapping, so that's the reason we are not mapping any spokes under the hub section statically. I'm going on spoke 2, interface tunnel 1, IP address would be 255.0, tunnel source should be gig 0/0, IP NHRP network ID would be 10. We won't be doing any tunnel destination since it's in phase 2. So the tunnel mode would be GRE multipoint and IP NHRP map. We on this dynamic mapping, right, we won't be doing any sort of static mapping for the hub. We only will be doing static mapping for the we won't be doing any sort of static mapping for the spokes, but only we'll do the static mapping for our hub, that is IP NHRP map 192.168.100.1 for reaching out to this IP and this tunnel IP. What would be our NBMA address? Okay, this one. Now what the reason why I'm not and on the previous section we have seen, right, IP NSRP map, you might be wondering, okay, since the lab says it's an dynamic mapping but still we are doing this static mapping, right? So the logic here is we are just statically mapping who the hub is, right? We are just registering our spoke, meaning by we are registering our spoke to the hub statically, but we are not registering any other spokes within the spoke statically. Okay, so that's the difference. So this spoke to spoke communication will happen, we'll verify without doing any sort of static mapping, right? Automatically we'll see on the output once we'll configure the lab, right? So we'll see this spokes will be registered in our database. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, don't get confused that like the lab says dynamic mapping but still we are doing a static mapping over here. No, this is fundamental. I mean, like, we at least spoke should know how to like who the hub is, right? What's the IP of the hub, what's the tunnel IP of the hub, how to reach out the tunnel IP of the hub. Okay, so yeah, back to the config. IP network ID have been configured, IP NHRP map have been configured. So what's the command we have left out with? IP NHRP NHS. This means next hop server. What would be our next hop server? That is IP NHRP NHS. You can do question mark. It says protocol IP address of the NHS, that is 192.168.100.1. Okay, so this would be our next hop server, that is tunnel IP address of the hub. Okay, so DM VPN. So I could see the tunnel is up from last 3 seconds. The state is up, the attribute is static, and yeah, this is the peer NBMA address and the tunnel IP address, spoke 1. Let's go to spoke 2. Like I haven't done any sort of static mapping for spoke 2. Okay, so let's jump into spoke 2 and configure the same did I configured? So running config for interface tunnel 1. Okay, config t interface tunnel 1 IP address 100.3. tunnel source should be our gig 0/0. tunnel mode would be our GRE multipoint. IP NHRP map for reaching out to hub. Tunnel IP, what would be my NBMA address? That is this. IP NHRP NHS is 192.168.100. Sorry, next hop server would be IP NHRP NHS 192.168.100.1. IP NHRP network ID would be 10. Okay, let's see if I have configured network ID on spoke 1 or not. So running config for interface tunnel 1. Okay, we have configured. That's the reason we have that entry over here, right? So so DM VPN, even we have a static mapping over here. Okay, now let's verify. Okay, what I'll be doing is okay, already I'm getting, I think that debug NHRP was already running on the hub section, so that's the reason we are seeing this NHRP registration request and the successful entries over here. Hmm. Okay. So let's verify from spoke 2 first. Can I reach out to my hub or not? Definitely we can. Ping 192.168.100.1. So this is an hub tunnel IP, so it's reachable, right? So DM VPN, I could only see the entry of my peer tunnel, that is hub. Right now, if I'll ping spoke 2 IP, tunnel IP 100.3, okay. See, here the mapping is static, right? Since we have done the static mapping for the hub, but we don't have any entry for spoke 2, right? Similarly for spoke 3, we don't have any entry for spoke 1, only for the hub, right? It's static. Now as soon as I will ping this 100.3, okay, and so DMVPN. Now see, I can able to reach out to the spoke, that is spoke 2, from spoke 1 to spoke 2, right? And now even I do have one dynamic entry that has been created for the spoke 2, getting it dynamically. So that's the beauty. Okay, so if I go on hub, then you will see some logs over here. That NHRP received resolution request via tunnel 1, right? And attempting to forward the destination. So as soon as we ping that 100.3, so the hub did forwarded this to 100.3, forwarding an SRP packet. So the source was 100.1 and the destination for 100.3, book 2, and if I'll verify same, so DM VPN, right? Even I do have one dynamic entry that has been created. Okay, so we haven't done any sort of static mapping, but dynamically spoke have learned about peer tunnel address and the NBMA address for reaching out to that peer, right? So that's the beauty. Over the hub section, if we can find something more, okay, what we'll be looking forward now, let's verify with some sort of, so DM VPN details, on, so DM VPN detail, what we are getting here is, so the type is spoke, right? And our NHS would be NHS IP, next of server IP is 100.1. so this entry and this peer and BMA address for the tunnel, it's up from this time, the attribute was static, and the target network, similarly for spoke, it was dynamic. And for, and where in spoke itself, this is an self entry for reaching out to me. uh, this would be my NBMA address, right? And the attribute is DLX. So D means dynamic, L means local. That's the reason it's local, right? So that's the reason we have this flag L. And X means no socket. So there is no open socket for this entry since it's a local. And if I'll hit enter, nothing much. So DMVPN details is covered. So DMVPN, I'll show you something. So IP NHRP NHS So Nextstop server is this. You can even use this command to verify what's the Nextstop server would be using this command. So IP NHRP summary. Okay, not summary. So NHRP traffic. See. So this is a good command to see, right? So on over the tunnel one, like how much of traffic we have sent. Total 3 traffic have been sent, 3 have been received. One was the resolution request, one was the resolution reply, and one was the registration request. Similarly, 1, 1, 0, right? So if you have multiple tunnels and like you can see, right, what's the usage, what's the limit, and so on. So if there would be any sort of errors or indications, that's something you can see over here. But right now we don't have any sort of errors. Okay, so yeah, that's what I just wanted to use these couple of commands to showcase you, just to verify. It might be helpful for you to uh, do some sort of findings, right, based on your uh, scenario. Okay, so one more thing I think I have just missed to verify the trace route part from spoke to spoke. That's something I'd like to just verify for this video, just for the reference, if in case you might feel I haven't verified that thing, right? And so the motto of phase two was, so the motto behind phase two was direct spoke to spoke communication, right? So trace route from spoke 1 to spoke 2, 192.168.100.3. Okay, so we should be seeing only one hub. We should not be seeing hub in between. The trace route, the jump should be directly to 100.3. So that's what the phase 2 is about, right? So I think this was just I missed to showcase in this video, but yeah, I'll just add it in between somewhere. Okay, so see, we have an direct spoke to spoke reachability. Okay, okay, so yeah, so lab for DMVP in phase 2 using dynamic mapping, that's something we have covered on this lab. I hope you, so total 4 labs we have done for static dynamic phase 1, static dynamic phase 2. So what's the difference on the command line between static and dynamic, right? How to verify, how to see, right? At least like like doing this lab, at least when you will be working on live environment, at least when you will be doing so running config for interface tunnel 1 or any tunnel or any tunnel interface, right? So looking into the configuration, at least you should verify, you should have that understanding, right? I'm like so no IP redirect, that's something we'll be looking into phase 3. Let's leave it for now, but at least doing this lab, this sort of lab, you'll able to like looking into this configuration, you should verify, you should able to know, realize what's the phase that this uh, router is running, what's the DMVPN phase we are running over here, looking into the configuration. Okay, if there would be an internal source and internal destination, you should verify, okay, it's a phase 1, and looking over the mapping, if there is any static mapping, then you should able to know, okay, it's in DMVPN phase 1 and the mapping is static. Phase 1 mapping is dynamic, so it's in phase 2 mapping is static, the phase 1, phase 2 mapping is dynamic, and so on and so forth. Okay, so at least that's the base. I'll just like that's a very basics. So this is a very basic lab that I just wanted to showcase you, just you would understand the difference in the command, right? Just to differentiate how we can differentiate the phase 1, phase 2, and going for the phase 3 on the basis of the simple commands. And later on, like we will be purging a lot of much configuration over this tunnel as well. Okay, we'll be using authentication, we'll be using IPsec to protect this DMVPN and so on. So okay, so there will be much more commands. So before proceeding over there, I just wanted to like at least you should know this, what's the logic behind this lab. So I hope you'll practice and you'll understand something from here. And thank you so much for watching. and if you have any doubts, do let me know in the comment section below, and see you until next time. Thank you.